The massive space station called Concordia Prime had never seen anything like the humans who were walking through its shining metal hallways. Li Hyun, the human ambassador, straightened his best diplomatic suit as he led his small team deeper into the station. His heart was beating fast, but he tried to look calm and confident. This was humanity's biggest moment, their first real meeting with the aliens who ruled the galaxy. Walking behind him was Dr. Park Soo-jin, a brilliant scientist who studied alien life forms. She carried a small device that was recording everything they saw. Next to her walked Captain Kim Min-ho, a tough military officer whose job was to keep the diplomats safe. All three humans had trained for years for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to see. The space station was huge, bigger than any city on Earth. Its corridors stretched in every direction, with strange, alien symbols glowing softly on the walls. The air smelled different here, like metal and something sweet that the humans couldn't identify. Every few minutes, they passed aliens walking in the opposite direction. Some looked almost human, but with different colored skin or extra eyes. Others were so strange that the humans had to force themselves not to stare. As they walked, Li Hyun thought about how his grandfather used to tell him stories about meeting strangers from other countries. "Always be polite," his grandfather had said. "Show respect, but never bow so low that you forget who you are." Li Hyun hoped those old words would help him now, even though he was meeting strangers from other worlds instead of other countries. The Grand Assembly Chamber was the most beautiful and terrifying room any of the humans had ever seen. It was shaped like a giant circle, with walls made of some kind of crystal that caught light from outside and spread it around the room in rainbow colors. The ceiling was so high that it seemed to disappear into darkness above them. 12 huge platforms rose from the floor, each one holding a different alien representative. Dr. Park Soo-jin gasped quietly as she looked around. Each alien was more incredible than the last. One looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and clicking sounds coming from its mouth. Another seemed to be made of living metal that shifted and changed shape as it moved. A third was so tall and thin that it looked like a walking tree with skin that glowed softly green. "Humans of terror," said a deep, rumbling voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The voice belonged to Councillor Vorthak, a creature that looked like a cross between a crab and a spider, but the size of a small car. When he spoke, his mouth parts clicked together in a way that made the human's skin crawl. "Welcome to the Galactic Council. We trust your journey from your little planet was educational." The way he said "little planet" made it clear that he didn't think much of Earth or its people. Captain Kim Min-ho's jaw tightened, but he kept his mouth shut. This wasn't the time to start a fight. Li Hyun stepped forward, feeling very small in the huge chamber. A little device on his collar hummed as it translated his words into the alien languages. "Honored counselors," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "We come here today seeking peaceful integration with your great civilization. We hope to learn from you and perhaps share what knowledge we have gained in our own small corner of the galaxy." He was about to continue when a sharp, high-pitched whine filled the air. The sound made all three humans wince and cover their ears. One of the aliens, a tall, snake-like creature with scales that reflected the crystal light, had stood up from his platform. In his clawed hand, a weapon had appeared from nowhere, sleek and deadly-looking. "Forgive this demonstration," the snake alien said, his voice hissing in a way that made the human's blood run cold. "But our protocols require us to verify your compliance capacity before we can proceed with any negotiations." Dr. Park Soo-jin felt her heart stop. This wasn't part of the plan. Nothing in their briefings had mentioned any kind of weapons test. She looked at Captain Kim Min-ho, but even he seemed shocked by this sudden turn of events. The weapon in the alien's hand began to glow with a brilliant blue light. Every alien in the chamber leaned forward in their seats, watching with what looked like excitement. This was clearly something they had all seen before, something routine for them. "This is a neural disruptor," the snake alien explained casually, as if he were talking about the weather. "It has never failed to pacify any thinking being in the recorded history of our galaxy. You will find the experience quite peaceful." The weapon fired with a flash so bright that it lit up the entire chamber. The energy beam struck Lee Hyun directly in the chest, and every alien in the room waited to see the human ambassador collapse in peaceful submission, just as thousands of other species had done before. Instead, Lee Hyun just blinked twice and looked around the suddenly quiet chamber with confusion. "I'm sorry," he said politely. "Was that supposed to do something to me?" The silence that followed was so complete that the humans could hear their own heartbeats echoing in the vast chamber. The moment Lee Hyun stood there completely unaffected by the neural disruptor, chaos broke out in the Grand Assembly chamber. Aliens began chattering in dozens of different languages, their voices mixing together into a confused mess of sounds. Some were clicking, others were making musical tones, and a few were producing noises that sounded like machinery breaking. "Down! Test them again!" demanded Councillor Vorthak, his four eyes now focused entirely on the three humans. There must be some mistake with the weapon. What happened next would be talked about in alien history books for generations to come. One by one, each species on the council decided to try their own methods of controlling minds. It was like watching a parade of impossible weapons, each one more advanced and terrifying than the last. The crystalline aliens called the Veltari were the first to volunteer. They looked like living gemstones, with bodies that caught light and threw it back in. Beautiful patterns. Their representative, a tall blue crystal being, stepped forward and activated what they called sonic mind scramblers. These devices had been used to end conflicts across the galaxy for thousands of years. The sound they produced could drive even the most violent warriors insane with fear, or reduce them to crying children who forgot how to fight. Dr. Park Soo-jin volunteered to be the test subject. The crystal alien aimed the device at her and activated it. A horrible screeching sound filled the chamber, so loud and piercing that several of the other aliens covered their ears. The sound was designed to scramble brainwaves and leave the victim helpless and confused. Dr. Park Soo-jin just winced and rubbed her ears. "Wow, that's really loud," she said. "Could you maybe turn it down a bit? It's giving me a headache, but otherwise I'm fine." The crystal alien stared at her in disbelief. This weapon had once stopped an entire army of berserker warriors who were known for their resistance to pain and fear. Those warriors had collapsed and started crying for their mothers. But this small human woman was just asking them to lower the volume like it was annoying music. Next came the gaseous Nethri, aliens who looked like floating clouds of colored smoke. They didn't have solid bodies, but somehow they could still communicate and think. Their method of control was even more subtle and dangerous. They released special chemicals into the air, pheromones that could change how people thought and felt. These chemicals had ended 3 major galactic wars. Entire fleets of warships had simply stopped fighting and gone home peacefully after being exposed to Nethri pheromones. Captain Kim Min-ho stepped forward for this test. The Nethri representative released a cloud of sweet-smelling gas around him. The gas was supposed to make him feel calm and peaceful, so relaxed that he would agree to anything the aliens asked of him. Other species exposed to this gas had literally forgotten why they were angry and became as gentle as sleeping babies. Kim Min-ho stood in the cloud of gas for several minutes. Then he scratched his nose and said, "This smells kind of like the flowers back home during spring season. Makes me want to sneeze a bit, but that's about it." He paused and looked around. "Is something supposed to be happening? Because I still feel like myself." The floating gas alien made a sound like wind whistling through a broken window. This was clearly not the reaction they had expected. By now, other aliens in the chamber were getting nervous. Some were whispering to each other in worried voices. Others were checking their own weapons to make sure they were working properly. A few had started backing away from the humans as if being near them might be dangerous. The most ancient alien in the chamber was called Mentark Kelthara. Nobody knew exactly what species she belonged to because she was so old that her people had evolved beyond physical form. She existed as pure mental energy, a being of thought and willpower that could reach into other minds and change them like a person might rearrange furniture in a room. Her psychic powers were legendary throughout the galaxy. She had once stopped a war by simply making all the soldiers forget why they wanted to fight. Lee Hyun agreed to be tested by this ancient being. Kelthara focused all her mental power on the human ambassador. The air around Li Hyun began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Other aliens in the chamber could actually feel the psychic pressure she was generating. It was like standing next to a dam that was about to burst. The mental attack that Kelthara unleashed was strong enough to shatter mountains. She had once used similar power to split apart asteroids that threatened inhabited planets. She pushed against Li Hyun's mind with enough force to crush the thoughts of 100 normal beings. Li Hyun just stood there looking around the chamber with mild interest. After a few minutes, he actually yawned. "Sorry," he said politely. "It's been a long day. Are we almost done with the demonstrations?" Mentarch Kelthara made a sound like a computer shutting down. For the first time in thousands of years, her psychic powers had accomplished absolutely nothing. Dr. Park Soo-jin, meanwhile, had pulled out her recording device and was taking notes like an excited student. "This is incredible," she said to the aliens. "Could you try that last one again? I want to measure the energy readings. The amount of power you're generating is amazing, but somehow it's just not affecting us at all." That's when the real panic started. Aliens began talking frantically to each other, their voices rising in pitch and speed. Some were making phone calls on devices that looked like glowing jewels. Others were typing rapidly on computers that seemed to be made of living metal. Councillor Vortak spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper, but his words carried across the entire chamber. "This changes everything," he said. "For 10,000 years, these weapons have kept peace in our galaxy. Species obey our laws because they know that if they rebel, we can simply turn off their ability to think freely. We can make them forget their anger, forget their independence, forget everything, except the desire to serve." He looked directly at the three humans, and for the first time there was something like fear in his four eyes. "Wars end before they begin, because everyone knows that fighting us means losing their minds. Entire civilizations submit to our authority, rather than face the horror of having their thoughts erased." Another alien, one that looked like a walking plant with flowers for a head, added in a shaking voice, "Every species in the galaxy lives under the threat of mental control. It's how we maintain order. It's how we prevent chaos." The chamber fell, silent as the full meaning of what had just happened sank in. These humans, these strange small beings from a tiny planet nobody had paid attention to, were completely immune to every form of mental control the galaxy had developed over thousands of years. For the first time in galactic history, the Galactic Council had encountered a species they could not control, and that terrified them more than any army or weapon ever could. After 3 long days of tests, scans, and experiments in the space station's medical bay, Dr. Park Soo-jin finally had answers that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about life itself. She had barely slept during those 3 days, working alongside alien scientists who were just as confused and amazed as she was. Their advanced medical equipment had scanned every part of the human brain, looking for some kind of special shield or defense mechanism that explained their immunity. What they found was far more incredible than anyone had imagined. Now, Dr. Park Soo-jin stood in front of the entire Galactic Council, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared to share her discoveries. Behind her, holographic screens showed images and data that made most of the aliens squint and look away. The information was so bright and detailed that their eyes, adapted to different kinds of light, had trouble processing it. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice surprisingly steady considering she was about to turn their understanding of the universe upside down. "After extensive testing and analysis, we have found the answer to why humans are immune to your mental control weapons." She touched a control panel, and the first image appeared on the screens behind her. It showed Earth as it looked millions of years ago, a beautiful blue and green planet that seemed peaceful and welcoming. "The answer lies in our evolutionary history," she explained. "You see, Earth was not like other planets where intelligent life developed. Earth was unusually hostile to life. The image changed to show Earth during an ice age. The entire planet was covered in white, with glaciers stretching across continents. Cities would have been buried under miles of ice. Every few thousand years, our planet would freeze completely. These ice ages lasted for thousands of years at a time. Most life on Earth died during these periods. Only the strongest, most adaptable creatures survived. Councillor Vorthak, the giant crab-like alien, leaned forward in his seat. His four eyes were wide with interest and growing concern. You mean your planet tried to kill you regularly? That's just the beginning, Dr. Park. Su-Jin continued. The images changed again, showing massive volcanic eruptions that threw so much ash into the sky that the sun disappeared for years at a time. Volcanic winters would block out sunlight for entire years. Temperatures would drop so fast that most plants died, and then most animals died from starvation. She clicked to the next image, showing the aftermath of meteor impacts. Every few million years, massive space rocks would hit our planet. Each impact was like setting off thousands of nuclear bombs at once. The explosions would destroy everything, for hundreds of miles around, and the dust they threw up would change our climate for decades. The aliens in the chamber were making worried sounds now. Some were clicking nervously, others were humming in distress. They had never heard of a planet so determined to destroy its own life. But wait, there's more, Dr. Park Su-Jin said, though she didn't sound happy about it. The images now showed the tiny organisms that had caused some of humanity's worst disasters. Plagues swept across our planet regularly, diseases that killed half the population at a time. The Black Death, smallpox, flu pandemics that wiped out entire cities. She paused and looked around the chamber. And then there were the predators. The screens now showed the ancient predators that had hunted early humans. Saber-toothed tigers with fangs longer than a person's arm. Cave bears that stood 10 feet tall. Giant wolves that hunted in packs of dozens. Our ancestors lived in constant fear. Every night something was trying to eat them. Every day they had to fight just to find food and water. Captain Kim Min-ho stepped forward. Dr. Park is being modest about our history. She's not even mentioning the wars we fought against each other, the famines, the natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis that destroyed our cities regularly. Lee Hyun nodded, grimly. We joke sometimes that if something bad can happen, it probably happened to humans at least once. Dr. Park Su-Jin touched the controls again, and the images changed to show human brain scans. Every generation of humanity survived apocalyptic events that would have completely destroyed most other species. Our minds didn't just learn to survive these disasters. They learned to resist any outside influence that might make us give up or stop fighting. She pointed to specific areas of the brain that were highlighted in the scans. What we discovered is that human consciousness developed multiple layers of protection. It's like we built mental walls without even realizing it. Every time our ancestors faced something terrifying, their minds got a little bit stronger, little bit more resistant to outside control. The ancient Mentarch Kelthara, the being of pure mental energy who had tried to crush Lee Hyun's mind, spoke in a voice like whispered wind. Are you saying that your species developed immunity to psychic control as a side effect of surviving your planet's attempts to kill you? Exactly, Dr. Park Su-Jin replied. But it goes deeper than that. Captain Kim Min-ho, would you like to explain? Kim Min-ho stepped forward, his military bearing making him look confident even in front of these powerful aliens. Every human child grows up hearing scary stories, ghost stories, monster stories, tales about things that go bump in the night. We think it's just entertainment, but it's actually training. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many aliens as he could. Every nightmare our children have, every horror movie they watch, every moment of fear they experience and overcome, it all makes their minds stronger. We've been unconsciously training ourselves to resist mental intrusion for our entire lives. Dr. Park Su-Jin nodded. When human children have nightmares, they learn to wake themselves up. When they're afraid of monsters under the bed, they learn to be brave. When they face bullies at school, they learn to stand up for themselves mentally and emotionally. Lee Hyun stepped forward with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. What you call your ultimate weapons, devices that can control minds and end wars, we call Tuesday. Every human deals with mental pressure and psychological stress as a normal part of life. The silence that followed was so complete that the humans could hear the soft humming of the space station's air recycling systems. In the space of just a few sentences, humanity had accidentally revealed that 10,000 years of galactic order was built on something they were naturally immune. To Councillor Vorthak was the first to speak. his voice barely above a whisper. "You mean to tell us that your entire species developed immunity to our most powerful weapons? By accident? Just by surviving on your planet?" "Not by accident," Captain Kim Min-ho corrected firmly. "By necessity. We didn't choose to become immune to mind control. Our planet and our history forced us to become immune to it, or we would have died out millions of years ago." The implications of this revelation hit the chamber like a shockwave. Every alien present realized that their entire civilization, their laws, their peace, their order, was based on the threat of mental control. And now they had discovered a species that was completely immune to that threat, not through technology or training, but through the simple act of surviving their own world. For the first time in galactic history, the Council faced a species they could not control. And that changed everything. The moment Dr. Park Soo-jin finished explaining humanity's accidental immunity, the Galactic Council began falling apart, like a house of cards in a strong wind. What had been a unified government for 10,000 years suddenly split into angry, frightened groups within just a few hours. The news spread through the space station, faster than anyone could have imagined, and with it came fear, anger, and something the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia: hope for change. On one side were the aliens who saw humans as a deadly threat that needed to be eliminated immediately. These were the species who had built their power on the ability to control minds, and they knew that if other species learned about humanity's immunity, their entire way of life would crumble. Admiral Zexitar, a reptilian alien with scales that shifted color when he was angry, paced back and forth in the war room of his massive battleship. The ship was called Dominion's Edge, and it was one of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy. Around him, dozens of military officers from different species watched tactical displays that showed human space, Earth and its small colonies scattered across nearby star systems. "Look at these pathetic little settlements," Zexitar hissed, his scales turning a deep red color that meant he was furious. "A few dozen worlds with primitive technology. They don't even have proper space fleets, but they represent the most dangerous threat our civilization has ever faced." One of his officers, an insect-like creature with compound eyes, clicked nervously. "Sir, they seem peaceful. Their diplomatic messages indicate they only want friendship and trade agreements." Zexitar whirled around, his eyes blazing. "Peaceful, you fool. They don't need to be aggressive to destroy us. Their very existence is a weapon against everything we've built. Once other species learn that mind control can be resisted, they'll start asking why they should obey us at all." He pointed at the display showing human territory. "Every species in the galaxy stays in line because they know we can turn off their ability to think freely if they rebel. We can make them forget their anger, forget their independence, forget everything except the desire to serve. But these humans," he paused, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "these humans are immune. They can't be controlled, can't be pacified, can't be made to submit." Another officer, this one looking like a walking tree with crystal bark, spoke up hesitantly. "What do you propose, Admiral?" "Complete elimination," Zexitar replied without hesitation. "Every human world, every human ship, every human being must be destroyed before they can spread this infection of independence to other species. We'll tell the galaxy it was an unfortunate accident, a plague or a solar flare or some natural disaster, but they cannot be allowed to exist." Meanwhile, on the other side of the space station, a very different conversation was taking place. The coalition vessel Harmony's Dream was a beautiful ship that looked more like a floating garden than a warship. Its corridors were filled with plants and flowing water, and soft music played from hidden speakers. In the ship's central garden, ethereal matriarch Lilandra sat beneath a tree whose leaves glowed with soft light. She was one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, and her species had evolved beyond physical form long ago. She appeared as a shimmering outline of light and energy, beautiful and peaceful. Around her, advisors from a dozen different species sat in comfortable chairs, sipping drinks that tasted like liquid starlight. These were the species who had grown tired of ruling through fear and had been looking for a better way for centuries. "I have been thinking about what the human scientist told us," Lilandra said, her voice like music floating on a gentle breeze. "For 10,000 years, We have maintained peace by threatening to destroy the minds of anyone who opposes us. We have convinced ourselves that this is necessary, that without this threat, the galaxy would fall into chaos and war. One of her advisors, a being that looked like living water in a vaguely humanoid shape, rippled with curiosity. But now we have proof that a species can be free from mental control and still be peaceful. Exactly, Lilandra replied. These humans have lived their entire history without anyone controlling their thoughts, and they came to us seeking friendship, not conquest. Perhaps we have been wrong about the necessity of ruling through fear. Another advisor, a crystalline being whose body rang like bells when she moved, chimed softly, "If we no longer threaten mental control, how would we maintain order? How would we prevent wars and conflicts?" Lilandra was quiet for a long moment, her light flickering as she thought. "Perhaps," she finally said, "we could try something that has never been attempted in galactic history. Perhaps we could try ruling through genuine cooperation instead of fear." Back on Concordia Prime, Ambassador Lee Hyun was having the worst week of his life. He had come to the space station hoping to make friends for humanity, but instead, he had accidentally started what might become a galactic civil war. Every day he had to shuttle between different alien factions, each one more worried or angry than the last. The research that Dr. Park Soo-jin had presented was supposed to be classified, kept secret at the highest levels of government. But secrets have a way of spreading, especially secrets this big. Within days, every species on the station had heard at least rumors about human immunity to mind control. During an emergency meeting with the coalition leaders, Lee Hyun tried desperately to calm their fears. "You have to understand," he said, his voice tired from days of non-stop negotiations. "We never sought this immunity. We didn't even know it existed until you tested us. We didn't come here to threaten anyone or change your government. We just wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves." But even the peaceful coalition leaders were worried. "The problem isn't what you want," explained one of them, a floating jellyfish-like creature whose body pulsed with nervous light. "The problem is what your existence means for the rest of us. If other species learn that mind control can be resisted, they might demand the same freedom you have naturally." Meanwhile, Captain Kim Min-ho was receiving increasingly disturbing reports from human space. "Our merchant ships are being stopped and searched more frequently," he told Lee Hyun during one of their private meetings. "The aliens claim they're looking for contraband, but they're really studying our crews, trying to figure out how our immunity works." He showed Lee Hyun a tablet with data from human colonies. "Our outer settlements report strange alien ships, watching them from a distance, not attacking, just observing. They're cataloging our defenses, our population, our technology." Lee Hyun felt a chill run down his spine. "They're deciding whether we're a threat worth eliminating." "That's exactly what they're doing," Kim Min-ho confirmed. "Some species see us as the end of their way of life. Others see us as the beginning of a new one. But nobody sees us as just another species looking for friends." The message was becoming clear with each passing day. Humanity's mere existence had become a threat to the established order of the galaxy. They hadn't chosen to be immune to mind control, hadn't asked to upset 10,000 years of galactic government, but their natural immunity had made them the most dangerous beings in known space. Dangerous not because of what they might do, but because of what they represented: freedom, independence, the possibility that intelligent beings could govern themselves without the threat of mental slavery hanging over their heads. And that possibility terrified half the galaxy while giving hope to the other half. The attack came when most of the space station was sleeping during what they called dawn shift. Alarms started blaring throughout Concordia Prime as massive energy signatures appeared on every sensor screen. What materialized at the edge of the star system was something that hadn't been seen in over 1,000 years: the hegemony's ultimate weapon of mass mental control. The neural bombardment array was a terrifying sight to behold. It was the size of a small moon built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Thousands of energy collectors spread across its surface like a mechanical spider web, all designed to focus unimaginable power into a single planet-killing beam of mental subjugation. This weapon had only been used 3 times in galactic history, and each time it had turned entire rebellious civilizations into peaceful, obedient servants within minutes. Admiral Zextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, his reptilian scales now glowing bright red with anticipation and fury. Around him, hundreds of alien officers worked frantically at control stations, preparing to fire a weapon that could rewrite the minds of every living being on Earth. "Open communications to all frequencies," Zextar commanded, his voice filled with the confidence of someone who had never failed to get what he wanted. "Let the entire galaxy hear this." His message boomed across space, reaching every planet, every ship, every space station within 100 light years. "Humans of Earth," he announced, his words dripping with menace, "you have been judged a threat to galactic stability. Your immunity to proper control makes you dangerous to the natural order of civilized space. You have one choice: submit willingly to mental conditioning and become productive members of galactic society, or cease to exist entirely." On Concordia Prime, Ambassador Lee Hyun, Dr. Park Soo-jin, and Captain Kim Min-ho watched the massive weapon through the station's observation windows. They could see it charging, energy building across its surface like lightning trapped in a cage. "They're really going to do it," whispered Dr. Park Soo-jin, her face pale as she realized what was about to happen to their home planet. "They're going to try to mind control every human being on Earth at the same time." Captain Kim Min-ho was already on his communication device, trying desperately to warn Earth's defenses. But they all knew it was useless. Humanity had no weapons that could stop something that size, no shields that could protect against that kind of psychic attack. The neural bombardment array finished charging with a sound like thunder rolling across the vacuum of space. Energy that had been collected from an entire captured star now focused into a single devastating beam aimed directly at Earth. This was enough power to rewrite the thoughts of billions of people simultaneously, turning them all into willing slaves who would thank their conquerors for the privilege of serving. The weapon fired. The beam of mental control energy raced across space faster than light itself, carrying with it the combined psychic force of a dozen alien species. It was designed to penetrate every mind on Earth, strip away human independence and free will, and replace it with peaceful obedience to galactic authority. On Earth, 8 billion people were going about their normal daily lives when the attack hit. In New York, office workers were drinking their morning coffee. In Seoul, children were playing in parks after school. In Lagos, families were sitting down to dinner. In Mumbai, night shift workers were heading home after long days. The psychic wave washed over the entire planet like an invisible tide. For just a moment, every human being on Earth felt something strange, like sunlight filtering through clouds, warm but distant, present but not quite touchable. Children looked up from their toys with curious expressions. Adults paused in their conversations and glanced around as if they had heard someone call their name. Then, almost as one, 8 billion humans shrugged their shoulders and went back to what they were doing. In the command center of Dominion's Edge, Admiral Zextar stared at his control screens in disbelief. Every sensor, every monitoring device, every piece of equipment designed to measure the weapon's effectiveness showed the same impossible result: zero impact. "Fire again!" Zextar screamed, his scales now flickering between red and black, colors that indicated panic among his species. "Maximum power. Pour everything we have into that beam." "Sir," one of his officers replied, his voice shaking with fear, "the array is already at maximum output. We're channeling the entire energy of a star through the focusing crystals. Any more power will destroy the weapon itself." "Then destroy it," Zextar roared. "I don't care if we burn out every system on this array. Those humans will submit." The weapon fired again, this time with so much power that the neural bombardment array began to glow white-hot. Energy poured toward Earth in a stream that could have melted mountains or boiled oceans. The psychic force was so intense that sensitive aliens throughout the galaxy felt echoes of it, even from thousands of light years away. On Earth, people felt the second attack as a slightly stronger version of the first, like standing in warm sunlight on a pleasant spring day. A few people commented that it felt nice, whatever it was. Then they continued with their lives completely unaffected. The news of the failed attack spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. Within hours, every species, every government, every rebel group hiding in the dark corners of space knew the truth. The hegemony's ultimate weapon had failed completely. For the first time in galactic history, an entire planet had shrugged off the most powerful mind control device ever created. The effect was immediate and revolutionary. On planets that had been under mental control for centuries, populations suddenly realized that if humans could resist the weapons that kept them enslaved, maybe they could resist too. Maybe they didn't have to live in fear anymore. The Thornaxian Collective, a species of warrior poets who had been kept docile by neural inhibitors for 3,000 years, were the first to rebel. They destroyed the control devices that had been implanted in their cities and declared their independence from galactic authority. The mining guilds of Kepler's Edge, workers who had been forced to labor in dangerous conditions under threat of mental punishment, threw down their tools and demanded freedom. Entire star systems that had been subjugated for generations rose up in peaceful revolution, inspired by humanity's proof that the galaxy's rulers were not as all-powerful as they claimed. Within weeks, the old Galactic Council had collapsed. The towering pedestals where alien overlords had looked down on lesser species were torn down. The intimidating displays of power and the weapons of mental control were dismantled. In their place, something new was born. Ambassador Li Hyun stood in the center of what had once been the Grand Assembly Chamber, but now looked completely different. Instead of towering platforms that put some species above others, there was a simple circle of chairs where representatives sat as equals. "We propose," Li Hyun said to the gathered representatives of dozens of species, "a new form of governance for our galaxy, one based on cooperation instead of control, where species work together because they choose to, not because they're afraid of what will happen if they don't." Dr. Park Soo-jin watched from the observation deck, smiling as she saw something that would have been impossible just months before. In the station's recreational areas, human children were playing games with young aliens from a dozen different species. Their natural immunity to mind control meant that these children would grow up in a galaxy where freedom of thought wasn't just hoped for, it was guaranteed. Captain Kim Min-ho sent his final report back to Earth Command, and it was shorter than anyone expected for such a historic mission. "Mission accomplished," he wrote. "We came to the stars seeking acceptance and friendship. We accidentally delivered liberation to an entire galaxy. The galaxy would never be the same again." Species that had lived under the threat of mental slavery for thousands of years were now free to think their own thoughts, make their own choices, and build their own futures. And for the first time in 10,000 years, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. As the new council began its first session, representatives from hundreds of worlds raised their voices in genuine discussion and debate, not because they were forced to agree, but because they finally had the freedom to disagree. It was messy, it was loud, and it was absolutely beautiful. Humanity had come to the stars as students, hoping to learn from older and wiser civilizations. Instead, they had become teachers, showing the galaxy what it truly meant to be free. Retry Claude can make mistakes.